Assessing for competency versus assessing for improvement. Why assessing for competency is not your goal. Assessing for competency. As an instructor, your job is to teach the course learning outcomes as defined in the master course outcomes in the course syllabi. In the past, the assessment committee and the assessment process really focused on having faculty show the college that they were doing their job. That job is to teach to the course outcomes, and so in a way, faculty are assumed to assess for competency in their job all the time. So what does it look like when somebody does an assessment for competency as their assessment for the year? Well, let's pretend we're English instructors trying to assess communications in the English 101 course, Learning Outcomes 7. Students will be able to show an understanding of MLA format, including incorporation of source material and citation. Assessing for competency usually starts with a question. Are my students showing an understanding of MLA format? Assessing for competency is usually focused on finding out the answer to that question. I will quiz my students on MLA format and see what they know. Assessing for competency usually ends with a simple answer to that question. After tallying the results, I see that my students do understand MLA and I am teaching to this standard. So you might be thinking, what's wrong with assessing for competency? Well, assessing for competency is already part of your everyday job. The college would like to see that you're doing more than just meeting basic requirements of teaching the course. Assessing for competency does not reflect whether you are continually engaging with what you are doing in the classroom. When you only assess to show that you're teaching to the outcomes of the course, it's only reflecting that you're doing the bare minimum and not showing that you change and adapt to problems, concerns, etc. It does not reflect any sort of growth. Assessing for competency is more similar to an audit. Auditing is just about showing that the parts are there. Auditing is a checklist. So assessing for competency is more similar to an audit, whereas assessing for improvement is more true to what assessment should be, a cycle of engagement. An assessment cycle includes many steps. Those steps include documenting learning outcomes, which we do every 7 years, but we also did at the beginning of our assessment process. Teaching to the learning outcomes, which is what everyone's expected to do. Assessing those learning outcomes, interpreting the assessment results, making changes to the course and or program, comparing and interpreting the impact of the changes, and amending learning outcomes as necessary. The problem with assessing for competency is that a lot of times you just assess the learning and interpret the results, those two things over and over and over. And so you really should be trying to engage with more of the assessment cycle. So what does assessing for improvement look like? Well, let's take the same example. Pretend we're English instructors trying to assess communications or institutional outcome 1 and the English 101 course outcome, learning outcome 7. Students will be able to show an understanding of MLA format, including incorporation of source material and citation. Well, when you assess for improvement, you start with a problem. So you might say, I've noticed that my students are not demonstrating MLA format in their essays. Then you move on and you try to focus on changing something in your teaching to improve the ability for students to meet that learning outcome. So you might say, I will add instruction surrounding MLA before each essay. Lastly, assessing for improvement usually ends with comparative data. So after tallying the results, I see that my additional instruction improved the use of MLA in my students' essays. So if you're watching this and thinking, is there anyone that can help me create an assessment around improvement? Well, there is. So one thing you can do, you can go to the instruction and assessment page of Big Ben's website. You'll find a document under templates that says Assessing for Improvement Worksheet. This is the same worksheet that's referred to in various assessment videos. Another thing you can do is the assessment committee is made up of faculty from all divisions, including yours, as well as administrators across campus. You can email me or anyone on the committee for help. Lastly, I recommend watching the videos, especially the assessment from start to finish for the year we are currently in. You wouldn't believe how many people email me with questions and then email me back after watching the video saying, okay, I get it now. What if you have something like this going on in your head? Right now I'm thinking about what you are saying and I'm motivated to do a really amazing assessment based on improvement and making a change. However, every year I end up doing a sort of lame assessment, and even though you don't say it is lame, I can tell by the look in your eyes and the shame in my heart that it is lame. Well, what's going on with that? Assessing for competency doesn't require any planning or any changes on the part of the instructor. Because of this, it is very easy to fake an assessment after a class is already over. You can actually start with a question after the class is done. Assessing for improvement requires that you actually make a change and document that process during the quarter. If you're beginning your assessment during the last week of class, it is difficult to impossible to assess for improvement.